Veronica Panarello was born on November 1st, 1988, in a small village in Sicily to a family headed by Carmela Angut, a homemaker, and Francesco Panarello. In total, Carmela had 5 children with 3 different fathers. During her childhood, Veronica's family relocated to Liguria in search of better opportunities. Those years seemed relatively peaceful, although it was known that she faced challenges in adapting to school. Years later, Carmela admitted that Veronica may have needed psychological support during that period in the late 1990s. The family eventually decided to return to Sicily, where Veronica attended high school before enrolling in a local art school. However, that time was far from serene, as complications arose in her teenage years. Veronica began to exhibit signs that something was amiss, a situation exacerbated by her discovery that Franco was not her biological father and that her real father had never shown interest in her. Upon learning this truth in her adolescence, Veronica attempted to reach out to her biological father, who was indifferent to establishing a relationship with her. At around 15 years old, after an altercation with her classmates, she made her first suicide attempt by ingesting bleach. A year later, Veronica overheard her mother discussing a sensitive matter on the phone. Veronica overheard her mother speaking on the phone with a friend and went to inform Franco that his wife was cheating on him. However, he dismissed her claims, and some sources even allege that he slapped her in response. Shortly thereafter, the medical assistance team was called to the family's residence, as Veronica had again attempted to take her own life, this time by hanging herself with strips of plastic in the greenhouse. Fortunately, the improvised rope broke, and she was discovered in time, resulting in no severe physical harm. Nonetheless, the young woman was temporarily admitted to a psychiatric ward. While in the ward, she called her mother to come and pick her up, alleging that she had been abused by a nurse while under the influence of painkillers. This was not the only instance in which Veronica claimed to be a victim of attempted sexual assault. However, we found no official reports documenting these events. Some journalistic sources suggest that Veronica was particularly affected by the case of Denise Pipitone, a 4-year-old Italian girl who disappeared without a trace in September 2004 and was never heard from again. Veronica approached the authorities, claiming to have information that she did not actually possess. Despite her fluctuating moods, Veronica was perceived by her friends as beautiful and cheerful, which attracted the attention of several boys. She worked as a waitress in a pub, where she met a young man named Davide, who was 2 years her senior and lived in the town of Modica, also in Sicily. Little is known about David's life, but he was the son of Andrea and his wife Giuseppina, a couple who later separated. David also had a sister named Jessica, though little is reported about the dramas within their family. Sooner rather than later, Veronica and David began dating. During this time, Veronica confided in her suitor about her strained relationship with her family. The situation became more complicated when she discovered that she was pregnant. Veronica felt that, under these circumstances, she could not remain at home. Fortunately for her, both the father of the baby and her family offered their support. Consequently, a room was quickly prepared at the Stevel residence, becoming the space for the young and excited couple. It is worth noting that reports vary regarding Veronica's circumstances, with some sources claiming that she moved into the Stevel home before becoming pregnant. David, recognizing the strained relationship between Veronica and her family, chose to move in with her. At one point, Veronica even asserted that she had been kicked out of her house. By the time she was 16 years old and pregnant, she was living with the Stevels. Despite his youth, David took on the responsibility of bringing a child into the world. He worked diligently at the truck driving job he had just started, determined to provide for Veronica and their child. On June 18, 2006, their 6, Loris Andreas Deval was born. Some time later, the couple formalized their marriage, and in 2010, they welcomed their second child. The family of 4 settled in Santa Croce Camarina, where they established a home. Veronica dedicated herself to caring for the children and managing the household, while David intensified his work to meet their needs, spending long hours driving a freight truck across the country. Despite his extended absences, the couple maintained constant communication, as evidenced by their telephone records. Loris was described as a very intelligent boy, albeit somewhat shy and distrustful of strangers. To bolster his confidence and character, his parents enrolled him in a martial arts school, where he developed a passion for taekwondo. It was noted that he missed his father greatly during David's business trips, with the two staying in touch regularly by phone. However, everything changed on November 29, 2014. At that time, Veronica was 26 years old, her husband David was 28, and their children were 8 and 4 years old respectively. On that particular morning, as she did every day, Veronica prepared her children for their respective activities. Loris was to attend elementary school, while his younger brother would go to daycare. Veronica planned to drop them off and then attend a cooking class she was enrolled in, intending to pick up her little ones afterward and return home. However, the events of that day would unfold quite differently. As usual, Veronica waited at the school gates for her eldest son to come out. One by one, she watched other children leave with their guardians, but Loris did not appear. Concerned, she went inside to speak with his teacher and inquire about Loris's whereabouts. The surprise teacher assured her that Loris hadn't attended classes that day. Veronica couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had left him just a few meters from the school entrance herself. After confirming with several of Loris's teachers and classmates that no one had seen him that day, she immediately went to the police to report her son's disappearance, as was logical in such cases. The police officers quickly sprang into action. As a first step, they brought in AB bone dogs, presenting them with a pair of pajamas Loris had worn the night before, hoping the dogs could track his scent from where his mother claimed to have last seen him that morning. Unfortunately, the cannons found no leads to follow. Despite an extended search in the surrounding streets, they failed to detect the boy's scent. News of Loris's disappearance rapidly circulated through the small town, reaching the media, which promptly began to publish his image and request the public's help in locating him. In a nearby home, a woman watched the news with growing concern for the missing child. She urged her husband, Horacio Fidon, a retired man with a passion for hunting, to organize a meeting with friends to aid in the search efforts. Although not particularly close to Loris's family, Horacio knew Andrea, Loris's paternal grandfather, and felt compelled to act. Without waiting for a gathering, Horacio embarked on a personal exploration, thinking he might contact some friends along the way if needed. However, it soon became apparent that he would not require their assistance. At 4:55 that same afternoon, Horacio called the emergency number to report that he had found the little boy, but sadly, the news was not good. The news was indeed grim. Authorities quickly rushed to the site where Horacio was waiting. It was a vacant lot near an old, abandoned mill located approximately 4 kilometers from Loris's school. Horacio guided the officials to a small cement wall, behind which, a few meters below, was a canal that once carried water but now held the lifeless body of young Loris. Upon arriving, rescuers descended into the canal and confirmed the child's death. Reports indicated that his pants were down, and some sources suggested he wasn't wearing any underwear. Other accounts maintained that the child was. Moments later, Veronica was notified of the discovery and taken to the scene to confirm that the body was indeed her son. This scene repeated itself for an agonizing time. The mother was utterly devastated, requiring removal from the area as investigators secured the scene while the rescuers proceeded to retrieve the body for transport to the forensic medical examiner's office. No serious wounds or injuries were visible, save for a small bruise on his face and some scrapes, with no obvious traces of blood present at the scene. The stiffness of the body suggested that the boy had been dead for some time. An investigative file was immediately opened regarding the crime committed against the boy and the circumstances of his abduction. Surprisingly, the first person arrested was Horacio, who had promptly found the boy fatally. He was taken to the police headquarters for questioning. Meanwhile, David, Loris's father, who was in northern Italy, received a phone call with the devastating news, prompting him to begin his journey back to his hometown. Once Veronica was slightly calmer, albeit still steeped in grief. She began to respond to the investigators' questions, which aimed to reconstruct step by step what transpired on that fateful morning of November 29th, 2014. Among the revelations that surfaced was that this was not the first time Loris had resisted going to school, as confirmed by a paternal aunt. There had been at least one previous incident where the child did not attend school and was later found wandering near the school grounds. The family acknowledged this fact, and the distance between the school and the location where the body was found could have easily been traversed by an 8-year-old child, which made it seem unlikely that he had wandered there on his own. If this were the case, it could have been an accident in which Loris, attempting to avoid school, went for a walk and possibly fell into the canal while playing in the area. Another hypothesis suggested that Loris might have been abducted by an unknown person while walking the short distance of a few meters from where Veronica claimed to have left him to the canal. However, both the mother and other relatives found this theory implausible, asserting that Loris was a rather shy child, suspicious of strangers and reluctant to engage with them. They believed it was more likely a violent act than a tragic accident. The authorities had to await the first results of the forensic studies to confirm the cause of death. Meanwhile, Horatio remained in custody, subjected to interrogations in which he repeatedly stated that his only intention was to cooperate with the authorities in the search for the little boy. He explained that he went to that location because it was near his home and a secluded area where a curious child might potentially fall prey to worse intentions. The investigators made an appeal to the community, urging anyone who had seen Loris that morning or noticed anything unusual to come forward to the local police station. They also provided a description of Loris's backpack, which had not been found with the child, hoping its discovery might yield clues for the investigation. Officers began reviewing security footage from around the school, quickly noting that none of the cameras captured Loris entering the premises. A traffic officer, however, recalled distinctly seeing Veronica with her son in the car that morning. In the following days, a thorough search of the area where the body was discovered, as well as its surroundings, was conducted in hopes of finding any evidence that could assist the investigation. Simultaneously, the police began to collect additional footage from nearby security cameras. The investigation began with a focus on the vicinity surrounding the residence of the Panarello family, following the route that Veronica claimed to have taken with her children that day. Initial press reports cited an alleged witness who claimed to have seen Loris shortly after 9 a.m., wandering around town without his backpack. This lead prompted investigators to search for any footage from security cameras that might capture the child, while simultaneously continuing their interrogation of Horatio and examining his vehicle and residence just 2 days after the body was discovered. Local media reported the discovery of a child's underwear near the school, raising suspicions that it could belong to the deceased boy after receiving a tip from a citizen. Authorities were immediately dispatched to preserve any potential evidence at the scene. However, when Veronica was informed about the underwear, she confidently stated that it did not belong to her son. As investigations progressed, officials noted that, thus far, they had been unable to locate any security camera footage that recorded Loris at the school entrance or in its vicinity, although many images remained to be analysed. Furthermore, they aimed to confirm the statements of 3 children who reported seeing a car near the ditch where the body was found around 3 p.m. on the day of the incident. Unfortunately, the characteristics of the vehicle they described did not match Horatio's car, which remained the only focus of suspicion in the case at that point. In light of the ongoing investigation, officers in charge made another appeal to the community, requesting that local businesses or residences equipped with surveillance cameras send any relevant footage from that day to the police headquarters. Up to that moment, the only image available to detectives was captured by a bakery's camera, showing Veronica taking her youngest son to daycare after dropping Loris off at school. Veronica confirmed that, on the day of Loris's disappearance, she had dropped him off approximately 20 meters from the entrance of the educational center, where he was in the 3rd grade of elementary school. Finally, the first conclusions from the forensic studies regarding the boy's body became available. The child's body was examined, and the findings were made public by the prosecutor assigned to the case, Carmelo Petralia. Preliminary inquiries revealed that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation, which may have occurred shortly after a fall from a height of approximately 2 meters. This fall could also be considered a contributing factor to the cause of death, or an immediate subsequent event. It was noted that when the body was discovered, it exhibited advanced rigor mortis, indicating that death had undoubtedly occurred during the morning hours. Further information specified that the death likely occurred very close to 9:30 a.m., but this was only a fraction of the new details emerging rapidly throughout the investigation. The community was shocked to learn, just 4 days after the incident, that investigators were focusing on the victim's immediate family and their close associates. Neighbors of the small building where the family resided witnessed approximately 15 police officers, including forensic specialists, enter the Staval family home, where they conducted a thorough search for about 3 hours. During this time, they confiscated various items, including diaries, notebooks, and a computer. Additionally, luminol tests were performed in the house to detect any potential traces of blood or biological materials. Soon, it became apparent that, following the review of countless security camera recordings in the city on the day of the event, discrepancies had emerged between the evidence and the account provided by the child's mother. After analyzing hundreds of hours of footage, it was confirmed that at 8 a.m. that day, Veronica left the building with her 2 children, boarding their black Volkswagen Polo. Shortly thereafter, Loris was seen returning alone and entering the building. A quarter of an hour later, the woman's car was observed again, re-entering the garage after Veronica had taken her youngest child to daycare. At no point was Loris seen leaving the building. To this, the statements of another police officer on duty outside Loris's school were added, claiming to have seen Veronica in her car, but not recalling whether Loris was with her at that moment. Despite the availability of hours of footage from public and private security cameras that could yield valuable insights, these images contradicted Veronica's account that she had dropped her son off just a few meters from the Sriel entrance that morning. Investigators noted that Veronica's narrative regarding the events of that morning had changed from her initial statement, made at the time of reporting her son's disappearance. Initially, she claimed to have taken Loris to school, but, due to running late and encountering traffic, had dropped him off about 500 meters away to allow him to walk the rest of the distance. In a subsequent statement, she asserted that she had passed the school entrance, turned right at the first corner, and stopped a little further down the road to let Loris exit the vehicle approximately 20 meters from the school entrance. Additionally, her account regarding what transpired when she went to pick up her son at the end of the school day also changed. In her first version, she mentioned that upon not seeing Loris leave, she spoke with some of his classmates and the teachers, who informed her that he had not attended classes. In a second version, she stated that when her son did not emerge from the school, she conversed with classmates, sought assistance from a traffic officer, called her father-in-law, and then contacted emergency services to report the child's disappearance. Another discrepancy emerged regarding her activities after dropping off her children. Initially, she claimed that after taking her youngest child to daycare, she attended her cooking classes and remained there until noon. However, in a second account, she indicated that after dropping off the children, she returned home to complete some housework before heading to her cooking class. She mentioned arriving late to class that day, apologizing for her tardiness due to some unspecified problems, but she remained calm when speaking to the police. Veronica also referenced Loris's occasional tantrums about not wanting to go to school, noting that he was particularly upset that day because he wanted to accompany her to the cooking class, which could help explain her lateness. The cooking class might explain why the child had returned to the house. At the request of investigators, Veronica boarded a police unit and, accompanied by the officers, reconstructed her movements on the day of the events. According to detailed forensic studies conducted on Loris's remains, specialists concluded that the child had been restrained around the neck with a long plastic tie, commonly used by electricians for securing wires. Once fastened, these ties can only be removed by cutting them. Additionally, some sources reported that the post-mortem examination revealed a slight wound on the child's neck, possibly consistent with the use of scissors to cut the plastic tie, which would have led to asphyxia. The studies indicated that at the moment of his death, or shortly before, the child had his wrists bound together, likely with a similar plastic tie. Compounding the situation, several days after Loris's lifeless body was discovered, several teachers from his school visited the family home to offer condolences and support to the grieving mother. During this visit, they were taken aback when Veronica attempted to give them an open bag of long plastic ties, claiming that her son had been asked to bring them to school for a science experiment. The teachers were astonished and informed the press that they would never have requested such items, as they are extremely dangerous for children to handle. This incident drew the attention of detectives, and the information regarding Veronica's intent to hand over the bag of zip ties was relayed to them. Subsequently, representatives from the Educational Institute turned over the bag of ties to the police. It was later discovered that these ties matched the marks found on Loris's neck. Furthermore, officers inspecting the Stevell family residence noted that many pieces of furniture and wires in the home were secured with the same type of plastic ties. As a result, Veronica increasingly captured the detectives' attention, though at that time she was not yet under direct investigation. The detectives proceeded to request further inquiries regarding her involvement. The detectives requested information to extract the GPS data from Veronica's vehicle, as they needed to establish her route on the day of the events. Veronica granted permission, and based on her statements and the analysis of the trips made in her car on the day of her son's disappearance and death, investigators noted that after returning from taking her youngest child to daycare, she spent approximately 36 minutes at home. She left between 9:15 and 9:20 a.m. to attend a cooking class. The officers analysed this trip, determining it took between 15 and 20 minutes. Therefore, she should have arrived at her destination between 9:30 and 9:40 a.m. However, attendees at the class confirmed that Veronica arrived at 9:55 a.m. and even apologised for her delay, creating a 20 to 25-minute gap during which her whereabouts were unknown. While the detailed investigation process is lengthy and complex, particularly for those unfamiliar with the locality, it was established that surveillance camera footage and GPS data from Veronica's car past a corner only 50 metres from the road leading to where Loris's body was found. Furthermore, it was confirmed that Loris never arrived at school that day, and Veronica's car was never seen in front of the school, despite her repeated assertions to the contrary. She attempted to justify the movements of her vehicle by claiming she had made a detour to dispose of some garbage bags a little over a week after Loris's death. On December 9th, Veronica, accompanied by her husband, was summoned once again to give a statement to the authorities. This time, the interrogation took place at the prosecutor's not the police station. After 6 hours of questioning, the prosecutor's office issued a preventive detention order for charges of aggravated voluntary homicide and concealment of a corpse against Veronica, who continued to maintain her innocence. By this time, the authorities had no doubt about her culpability. Subsequently, she was transferred to the police station for a second interrogation. Meanwhile, a crowd gathered outside the police headquarters, eagerly awaiting her exit that night. Upon her transfer to the penitentiary, where she was to be remanded in custody, Veronica was met with a barrage of shouts and insults. The scene was no better upon her arrival at the prison, as she faced hostility from both bystanders and inmates. Despite the overwhelming evidence pointing to her guilt, several questions remained unanswered. Where was Loris's backpack? Why was the child not wearing his underwear? It goes without saying that both Veronica's and David's families were in shock over the unfolding events. Carmela recalled that her daughter had struggled with persecution delusions since childhood and had exhibited aggressive and violent behaviour. At one point, she had received treatment from a psychologist, whom she later refused to continue seeing. Other relatives, however, were less forgiving and called for exemplary punishment. Meanwhile, Horacio was released from custody, demonstrating his good behaviour by asserting that he had always remained calm and knew he would eventually return home, maintaining his innocence and stating he had only wished to help find Loris. In the midst of this turmoil, David, aged 29, tried to maintain his composure. He expressed to the media that his world would come crashing down if his wife were truly responsible for Loris's death. David recounted speaking to Veronica several times on the morning of the incident, during which she mentioned that Loris did not want to go to school, a behavior he found typical. He asserted that his wife sounded calm, and when they could not locate Loris by early afternoon, she called him to ask him to return home so they could search for their son together. However, shortly thereafter, he learned of the discovery of Loris's body via the internet. David also noted that he had tried to contact Veronica on 2 occasions, but she did not answer. In his dialogue with the media, David described his son as a quiet child who never exhibited any concerning behaviors. They had maintained contact by phone during his travels, and recently, Loris had been very enthusiastic about his taekwondo practice. David emphasized that he had never doubted Veronica, who had always acted as a devoted mother, even taking on the role of both mother and father during the days when his work kept him away from home. The grieving man expressed that in the 10 years they had been together, he had never witnessed any behavior that would have led him to suspect anything unusual. The tragedy prompted David to reflect on their entire journey as a couple, revealing that Loris's pregnancy had not been an accident, it was intentional. Since she was underage, they believed it was the only way to ensure that no one would object to their reunion. He recounted that they had consulted a judge beforehand to guarantee that no one would take the child away from them. However, David found it peculiar that on the day of the tragedy, Veronica parked their car in the parking lot instead of leaving it on the street, as was her usual practice. He stated to the press that whoever was responsible for his son's death should face justice, even if that person was Veronica. A couple of days later, after extensive discussions with the investigators, David revealed that he felt compelled to accept what the officials had presented to him. Yet he argued that it felt as if they were speaking about 2 different people. He pointed out that Veronica had never disclosed her past attempts to take her own life. In response to these allegations, Veronica wrote a letter to David, expressing her profound sadness over his doubts and questioning how he could believe she was capable of taking Loris's life while the investigation was ongoing. As the investigation progressed, the wiretapping of Veronica's family was authorized. Although Veronica claimed she had no knowledge of the old mill site, her mother contradicted her, stating that they had lived about 2 kilometers from it when Veronica was a child, and that she often accompanied her to fetch water. Andrea Panarello, Veronica's sister, revealed that Veronica had a second cell phone hidden in their home, allegedly containing photos and videos of Loris that she intended to record onto video discs. Andrea and their mother agreed that if Veronica were guilty, they did not believe she acted alone. Both were convinced she was covering for someone else. During questioning by the examining magistrate who was to validate her arrest, Veronica continued to assert her innocence, maintaining that she had not taken her son's life. She also denied having a hidden cell phone in her possession. Despite Veronica's claims of having a hidden cell phone, a newspaper report indicated that the police had indeed found a second device. It turned out that the phone had been lent by Veronica to a friend after her own had been damaged. Upon investigation, the authorities did not discover any relevant information for the case within the device. Around the same time, the final results of the medico-legal examinations of Loris's body revealed that the little boy had not been abused, either on the day of the incident or previously. The judge ultimately decided to validate the detention of the accused, issuing a statement filled with harsh words. The magistrate described Veronica's behavior as cynical, asserting that her actions exhibited a clear intent to inflict suffering on the child, a brutal act that revealed a cruel nature devoid of even the most basic human compassion. She was charged with aggravated homicide and concealment of a corpse. For a father, nothing is more difficult than enduring the loss of a child. Following the completion of all forensic requirements, Loris's body was handed over to his father, and the funeral and burial took place on December 18th. Veronica requested permission to attend the funeral, but her request was denied. A heart-shaped floral arrangement adorned with flowers spelling out Loris's name, along with a white ribbon inscribed with Mother Veronica, was left at the venue's gates, accompanied by other tributes, including puppets and numerous balloons. The touching case drew a large crowd, with the funeral attended not only by family and close friends, but also by many local residents. The church was filled to capacity, The only absent element was the media, to whom David earnestly requested not to enter. Officials and patrols secured the area, which was attended by approximately 2,000 people, including Loris's classmates from the Martial Arts Academy, who arrived wearing their kimonos and carrying white balloons adorned with the boy's face. Their collective goal was to seek justice, although it was anticipated that the legal process would take time. Meanwhile, 26-year-old Veronica was transferred to another prison as her defense lawyer appealed to the review court for her release, asserting that there was no solid proof of her client's guilt, only circumstantial evidence. However, the request was denied in 2014. In a related development, the local mayor offered David a job that would allow him to be closer to his youngest son. On January 6, 2015, the first meeting between David and Veronica in prison took place, but it was far from what the woman had anticipated. Instead of hugs, kisses, or tender gestures, David confronted his wife with the raw emotion of a grieving father, urging her to tell the truth. Eventually, Veronica admitted that she had not taken their son to school that day, but beyond this admission, she provided no further details. She expressed that there were thoughts weighing on her mind that she understood and could explain, but there were others that remained elusive. David pressed her, asking if she was covering for someone or if anyone was threatening her, but she denied both accusations. Veronica insisted that even if she had a lover, she would not protect him if he had harmed their son. During this meeting, she also mentioned that before attending her cooking course, she had returned home to give a stroller to a friend. However, she claimed that from that moment on, she experienced a significant mental block. Frustrated by the lack of clarity, David directly asked her if she had killed their son. Veronica vehemently denied it, asserting that she had no motive to do so. What seemed like a potential breakthrough in uncovering the truth soon stagnated, as Veronica offered no additional information. In August of the same year, Veronica's lawyer successfully secured a permit for her to visit his son's grave. Accompanied by guards, she was transported in an armoured van to the cemetery, where she spent about an hour at Loris's grave. During this time, she placed a bouquet of flowers brought by her father and spoke quietly, except when the guards overheard her saying that she would find out who was responsible for the murder. She expressed her determination to uncover who was responsible for her son's death. During November's interrogation, family members, although authorized, did not accompany her. Veronica finally admitted what she had previously confided to David. On the day of the events, she had not taken her son to school. Instead, she claimed that the child had returned home with some keys she had given him, yet she maintained that she had not taken her son's life. She reiterated that she could not remember anything beyond that point. However, just a few days after this statement, Veronica surprised the prosecutor's office with a new account, asserting that the incident had been an accident. She claimed that upon returning home after dropping off her youngest son at daycare, she found Loris lifeless, with a bridle tied around his neck. While she believed it was the result of the child's play with dangerous straps, she panicked and attempted to revive him, but to no avail. In her state of fear, she decided to dispose of her son's body in the mill area, convinced that no one would believe what had transpired. Investigators later expressed skepticism regarding this version of events, as all evidence indicated that Loris was a very intelligent child. Numerous items around the apartment were secured with plastic seals, and he was aware that these objects were locked and could not be reopened. In December, a court hearing took place where Veronica's defense attorney requested an abbreviated trial following a thorough psychiatric evaluation of his client. The judge agreed to the request, and during the same hearing, the prosecution added a charge of premeditation to the initial charges of aggravated homicide and concealment of the corpse. In the following days, another hearing was convened to appoint a team of forensic medical experts tasked with evaluating the mental state of the accused. The assessment began in January 2016 and was conducted over 3 sessions, with the first occurring at the end of that month. Veronica presented herself as a focused woman with an impressive ability to maintain attention during the interview, displaying a remarkable memory. She even engaged with the assessment team about a test she had previously taken, attempting to humanize her situation by sharing stories about her children and the wonderful relationship she had with them. However, during the second assessment meeting, which took place 2 days later, Veronica appeared completely unhinged, exhibiting bizarre behavior that specialists deemed false and evidently exaggerated. The third and final meeting occurred a little more than a week later, where she surprised the team by presenting herself as a coherent woman. In this session, she unexpectedly acknowledged her responsibility for the events but insisted that she had not acted alone. Veronica claimed that on the day in question, after returning from dropping off her other son at daycare, her father-in-law, Andrea, was at her home and engaged in an argument with Loris. According to this new version of events, Veronica immediately noticed that her son was frightened and distressed. She stated that Andrea ordered her to grab something to restrain the child, and without understanding why, she picked up nearby plastic ties. At that moment, the phone rang, prompting her to leave the room to answer it and close the door behind her. She spoke on the phone for a few minutes, without revealing the ongoing situation. Upon finishing the call, she placed the phone on the bed in her bedroom. When she returned to the child's room, she realized that Andrea had suffocated Loris with a USB cable, not with a cable tie as she had previously claimed. The argument between the child and his grandfather had erupted because Loris had discovered the extramarital affair between his grandfather and his mother. In anticipation of what her father-in-law might say, Veronica insisted that it did not matter what Andrea would claim. He had been there that day and ultimately ended her grandson's life. An accusation of such gravity warranted a thorough investigation. During this process, Andrea was detained and questioned. However, he vehemently denied the allegations, claiming that Loris was like a part of him and expressing a willingness to confront Veronica. He provided details about his whereabouts during the incident, which were corroborated by testimonies, telephone verifications, and signals from cell phone towers. Veronica later claimed that she had remembered everything after visiting her son's grave, but had refrained from speaking out earlier due to fear that her father-in-law and lover would harm her other son. In early February 2016, accompanied by a team of legal representatives, Veronica attempted to clarify what transpired in her home. She insisted that after dropping her youngest son off at daycare, she returned to find Andrea there, although it was noted that no surveillance camera had recorded his entry into the apartment. In her revised narrative, she stated that upon returning from daycare, she had encountered Andrea in the street, where he had entered her car, and lay down on the back seat to avoid detection. Once inside the house, Loris threatened to reveal his mother's affair to his grandfather, prompting Andrea to act violently. Accompanied by the investigative team, Veronica awkwardly and hesitantly reconstructed the events of that day, admitting that at one point she had even attempted to call emergency services but abandoned the idea, unsure of how to explain the situation. She asserted that when she returned to the room after speaking on the phone with her husband, she found her son lying motionless on his stomach. Following her husband's instructions, she attempted to resuscitate him. Later, under Andrea's guidance, she dressed the boy and, along with him, went to the area of the old mill to dispose of the body. However, this version of events also evolved, with Veronica eventually stating that the final act of disposal was carried out solely by her. This new account faced significant scrutiny, especially given the verification of Andrea's whereabouts during the time of the incident, and the fact that the marks found on Loris's neck did not align with those that would have been caused by a USB cable. These conclusions were supported by mental health specialists who indicated that while Veronica might exhibit histrionic or dramatic behavior, or even be dishonest, she was certainly not insane. They asserted that she was perfectly capable of distinguishing right from wrong, which meant that she could be tried for the murder of her son, Loris, in an abbreviated process, one that did not involve witness testimonies but relied solely on the statements of both parties. On October of the same year, 2016, the prosecution argued that even if an inappropriate relationship between the defendant and her father-in-law existed, it would be irrelevant to the case. The undeniable fact was that Veronica had taken her own son's life and subsequently covered it up. The prosecution highlighted that she had lied multiple times, denying evidence and altering her various accounts to align with the investigators' findings. Given these elements, the prosecution requested a sentence of 30 years of imprisonment. The defense made limited arguments, contending that the absence of evidence proving Andrea's presence in Veronica's home at the time of the incident did not entirely rule out the possibility that he had been there. They also suggested that it could not be definitively proven that Veronica acted alone in the crime. Furthermore, they proposed that the motive for the crime might be linked to a relationship between Veronica and Loris that was described as more akin to friendship than motherhood. After hearing from both sides, the judge announced that a decision would be made in a week's time. By mid-October, Veronica Panarello was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Reports indicated that due to her acceptance of the abbreviated trial procedure, she received a 1/3 reduction in her sentence, resulting in an actual prison term of 20 years. Additionally, Veronica lost custody of her minor son for the duration of her sentence and was ordered to pay civil indemnities of $3,000 to her husband and $100,000 to each of Loris's grandparents. The judge also denied the defense's request for Veronica to serve her sentence under house arrest. Although Veronica appealed the decision in July 2018, her appeal was unsuccessful and was upheld by the Court of Appeals in Catania. This time she lost her composure. As she was being escorted out of the courtroom, she had to be restrained by her guards. Veronica attempted to return, shouting at Andrea that it was all his fault, and that he should pray to God to be dead when she emerged, as she threatened to take his life with her own hands. It took considerable effort to remove her from the courtroom. The defense subsequently filed another appeal with the Supreme Court, which, at the end of November 2019, declared the appeal inadmissible, making the conviction final. However, this was not the end of Veronica's legal troubles. Andrea filed a lawsuit against her for slander and defamation, and in 2021 she was found guilty, resulting in an additional 2-year prison sentence. She was ordered to pay Andrea $24,000 in damages, along with the legal costs incurred. Veronica attempted to appeal this decision as well, but was again unsuccessful in the Court of Appeals. As unbelievable as it may seem, the story did not end there. In addition to her conviction for defamation, Veronica faced another pending court case for threats made against her father-in-law. The proceedings had been initiated in January 2020, and the judge's decision was still pending, though no details had been published in the media regarding the outcome. Furthermore, David Stiefel filed for divorce. The last reported information regarding Veronica dates to November 20th, 2020, when it was revealed that she continued to serve her sentence in a prison in Turin, where she was studying to become a social worker. By that time, she had severed ties with David and their son, but still maintained that she had been wrongfully convicted. Meanwhile, David continued to live with their youngest son, and on each of Loris's birthdays, he published a heartfelt letter to his son. The most recent update we found dates back to June 2024, where it was mentioned that the boy would soon be turning 18, an important milestone cherished by children, symbolizing the arrival of many new experiences, such as obtaining a driver's license and having a car. What the father lamented was that he could only think about and imagine these moments, as his son had been deprived of the chance to continue his life after enduring this long and tragic story. What are your thoughts on what transpired? Do you have any doubts regarding Veronica's guilt? We look forward to reading your comments and invite you to join us for our next video. Dear audience, we present yet another investigation. What do you think of today's case? We value your opinions, so please share your thoughts respectfully, both for the victim and for the viewers, as well as for us who will be reading them. Before you leave, please subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to share this video if you believe someone you know might find it interesting. Until our next criminal investigation, goodbye.